He was just the bellboy until he opened his mouth. That's when the whole building went silent. They called him Eli the Bellboy, like he was a cartoon character. Not Elijah, not Mr. Bennett. Just Eli, the kid who carried bags, kept his head down, and knew how to disappear when executives walked by. No one ever asked where he was from or why he spoke so softly. They didn't need to. To them, he was just another uniform, background noise. It was a Monday morning when everything changed. The hotel lobby was its usual mess of marble floors, high heels, and fake smiles. Elijah stood near the entrance, holding the door for a couple arguing in Italian. He waited until they passed, then muttered something under his breath. Perfect pronunciation, native rhythm. It wasn't just an accent, it was fluency. What Elijah didn't know was that someone was listening. Mr. Caro, the CEO of the hotel group, had just flown in unannounced. No press, no formal greeting. He liked to test his staff off guard, see who slipped up. So when he paused behind the column and heard Elijah casually respond in Italian, then seamlessly pivot to greet a Japanese guest in flawless Nihongo, he stopped walking. The man froze mid-step. Elijah, unaware, continued working, smiled, bowed politely, then turned to a Russian guest and helped them with directions. Again, fluid, confident, natural. That's when Caro stepped forward. "Where did you learn to speak all that?" he asked, loud enough for the lobby to hear. Elijah blinked. He turned slowly, still holding someone's luggage. "Sorry, sir?" Caro narrowed his eyes. Those languages, that wasn't Google Translate. That was real. The front desk clerk looked up. A concierge dropped her pen. Elijah gave a modest shrug. "I studied some, grew up around a few, picked up others." The room was silent, and in that silence, something shifted. Because for the first time in 2 years, Elijah wasn't just the bellboy. He was the center of the entire hotel. You ever seen a room actually freeze? Not in the dramatic movie kind of way, but real life? That's what happened. Nobody moved. The woman checking in stopped mid-sentence. The concierge acted like her keyboard suddenly didn't exist. Even the janitor paused, leaning on his mop like it was a cane. Because the CEO wasn't just talking to Elijah. He was interested. That never happened. "Elijah, was it?" Caro asked again, slower this time. "How many languages do you speak?" Elijah hesitated, not because he was unsure, but because he knew what would happen next. "About 9, he said almost apologetically, fluently. A snort broke the silence. One of the assistant managers, Miles, the kind who thought his cheap suit made him important, let out a laugh. "Sure, and I play piano for Beyoncé. Come on, man." Caro didn't laugh. "You're serious?" he asked. Elijah nodded. Japanese, Mandarin, French, Russian, Arabic, Yoruba, Spanish, English, and a bit of German. Miles scoffed again. "Say something in Russian then." Elijah turned to him, raised an eyebrow, and launched into a full sentence, a polite, fluid phrase about how the lobby was beautiful, but the management could use improvement. Nobody understood the words, but the tone, it hit. Miles flushed. "Okay, that's Russian. What about Mandarin?" someone whispered. Without missing a beat, Elijah turned toward the older Chinese guest who just walked in, greeted her perfectly, and helped her with check-in, all in Mandarin, not once glancing at a screen or translation app. That's when people started whispering. "He's legit. Wait, how long has he worked here? Why is he just a bellboy?" Elijah stood quietly, looking both powerful and out of place. Like a chess piece someone left in the wrong game. Caro was still watching him, arms crossed, not smiling. Then he said one word, "Interesting." And just like that, the power dynamic in the hotel shifted ever so slightly, but enough to feel it in the air. The next day, Elijah showed up in his usual uniform, black blazer, polished shoes, and that same quiet smile that made him forgettable. But now, people looked twice. The desk staff nodded. Guests leaned in like he was part of some hotel legend. And management? They didn't know what to do with him. Miles, still nursing his bruised ego, whispered to another supervisor, "He's probably just memorizing phrases. That's not the same as fluency." Right on cue, a French couple walked in arguing about their reservation. Miles rushed to help and butchered a few high school phrases like bonjour, problème, before Elijah gently stepped in, resolving the whole thing with charm, speed, and effortless French. The couple smiled. Miles turned red. Again. But the real shift came that afternoon. Caro summoned Elijah to his office. Elijah entered carefully, unsure what to expect. The CEO wasn't sitting behind the desk. He was pacing, like a man mid-calculation. "Tell me something, Elijah," Caro began. "Why are you here?" Elijah blinked. I work here, sir." "No. I mean, why are you really here? You're fluent in 9 languages. You handle guests better than my top managers. So why are you pushing carts instead of leading teams?" Elijah paused. He could have said a lot about what people assumed when they saw a young black man, about how HR ignored his resume, or how the interview panel complimented his demeanor, but never called back, about needing to pay medical bills for a mother whose name still sat on every appointment invoice. Instead, he simply said, "Because this was the first place that didn't hang up on me." Caro was quiet. "Elijah," he said slowly, "I don't think you belong here." Elijah's stomach tightened, but Caro wasn't finished. "I think you belong somewhere higher." For the first time, Elijah looked up, not out of politeness, but with curiosity. Something was happening. He just didn't know what yet. Elijah never liked talking about his past, not because it was shameful, but because people never really listened. He had been a prodigy once, a name professors passed around like a secret. That kid from Westbrook who speaks 5 languages already. He was offered a scholarship to a top linguistics program before he even finished high school. Not because he had money or connections, but because he had range. Arabic from his grandmother, Yoruba from his uncle, French from the neighbors upstairs, and everything else? Learned from books, YouTube, and shadowing tourists around the city just to mimic their accents. He wasn't trying to impress the world. He just loved the sound of language, how it made people feel seen. But none of that mattered when his mother collapsed in the kitchen 2 weeks before his college orientation. The diagnosis? Stage 4. By the time Elijah was supposed to be unpacking dorm boxes, he was in hospital waiting rooms, Googling how to decode insurance bills, and trying to stretch her disability check like it was elastic. The scholarship didn't cover life, so he deferred. Then deferred again. Then stopped mentioning school altogether. When his mom stabilized, barely, he needed a job. Fast. Somewhere that didn't care about degrees. Somewhere he could blend in, not be questioned. The hotel took him. No background checks. No one asked about his talents. They just handed him a bellboy uniform and said, "Smile." So he did. For 2 years, Caro didn't know any of this, but something in Elijah's eyes must have told him there was more. "You ever think about doing something bigger?" the CEO asked. Elijah gave a small smile, the kind that hides heartbreak. "Every day, but bills don't wait." That landed. Caro nodded slowly and said, "What if I found a way to make it worth your while?" That sentence stuck with Elijah the rest of the night, because he wasn't used to being offered anything without proving himself first. And for once, it sounded like an opportunity that didn't come with strings or judgment. The next morning, Elijah got a call from a number he didn't recognize. It was from upstairs, the executive suite. They wanted him on the 18th floor, not to carry luggage, to sit in. "Sit in on what?" he asked. "Just come clean," said the voice. He arrived to find Caro in a small conference room with two other suits, people Elijah had never seen before. One was tapping a pen. The other was typing without looking up. "Elijah," Caro said, "you said you spoke Mandarin, correct?" Elijah nodded. "Could you read this out loud?" He handed over a contract, 4 paragraphs long, dense with legal jargon and diplomatic phrasing. Elijah scanned it once, then read it flawlessly, pausing where needed, adjusting tone, even catching a slight misprint in one of the phrases. The pen tapper raised an eyebrow. "What about this one?" the other man asked, sliding over a Russian business memo. Elijah didn't flinch. He read, translated, clarified. They weren't testing him anymore. They were assessing him. Caro leaned back in his chair. "Let me be honest with you," he said. "We have a situation. There's a high-profile investor flying in tomorrow. She's picky, demanding, and doesn't speak a word of English. We were supposed to hire a cultural consultant, but plans fell through." Elijah blinked. "And you want me to translate?" Caro smiled. "Not just translate. We want you in the room, at the table, running point." Elijah swallowed hard. I don't think I'm qualified." "You're more than qualified," Caro said, nodding to the other men. "You're the only one here who doesn't panic under pressure and actually knows what he's saying." Elijah's heart was pounding. For the first time in years, someone wasn't asking him to shrink to fit a role. They were asking him to expand. But still, he couldn't shake one thing. Why him? Why now? And why did Caro look like he had something else up his sleeve? Elijah didn't sleep that night. He ironed his best shirt, which wasn't saying much, and rehearsed phrases under his breath until sunrise. This wasn't just a meeting. This was the first time someone in power asked him to be seen for who he really was. But when he stepped into the executive suite the next morning, he realized something was off. The room wasn't set up like a normal negotiation. No projector, no welcome folders. Just 3 men in tailored suits, Caro at the head of the table, and an empty chair facing them. "Elijah," Caro said, motioning for him to sit. He did. Then the questions started. Not about the investor, not about translation. "Walk us through how you'd handle an international conflict between 2 hotel brands with cultural misunderstandings. What's your opinion on Eastern European market growth? If you were in charge of global hospitality training, how would you standardize multilingual service delivery?" Elijah blinked. I thought this was about interpreting?" Caro smiled. "It is, but we're also exploring something broader." Elijah's hands tightened around the armrests. "I don't understand," he said carefully. Caro leaned forward. "I'm not just trying to impress an investor tomorrow. I'm trying to replace someone." The room went quiet. "One of our division heads is stepping down. We need someone young, sharp, global-minded, someone who understands people." Elijah's chest tightened. "But You're Elijah Bennett," Caro interrupted. "And you're the only person in this building who can say that sentence in 4 languages while solving real problems. We don't care what school you went to. We care what you know." Elijah didn't know what to say. 2 days ago, he was delivering towels to this very floor. Now they were talking about leadership. Still, part of him didn't trust it. Not yet. Because when you've spent your whole life being overlooked, opportunities like this usually came with a catch. He just didn't know what it was yet. The investor's name was Ms. Lian Wei. She didn't smile. She didn't shake hands. She walked into the conference room like she owned the hotel, and maybe, after today, she would. The executives sat stiffly, flipping through their translated pitch decks like they were cramming for a final exam. Caro gave Elijah a subtle nod. "You ready?" he whispered. Elijah nodded, but his palms were sweating. Miss Wei sat at the head of the table and said something in rapid Mandarin. No greetings, no pleasantries, just business. Every exec in the room looked at Elijah like deer in headlights. But Elijah didn't flinch. He leaned forward and responded, not just translating, but matching her tone, rhythm, and energy. He didn't just speak Mandarin. He understood it, the nuance, the unspoken meanings, the hierarchy of respect embedded in every word. Miss Wei tilted her head, then smiled barely. "Ni shadahen luli," she said. "You speak fluently." Elijah nodded. "Thank you. I hope to match your expectations." And just like that, he took over the meeting. The next 30 minutes were a blur. Elijah fielded questions about global partnerships, cultural intelligence, staff development. He translated answers for the execs, corrected their phrasing mid-sentence, even adjusted the pitch so it would land better in Ms. Wei's cultural framework. He wasn't the interpreter. He was the presentation. At one point, Caro just leaned back and stopped talking altogether, watching Elijah run the room like it was his boardroom. The same young man who used to wait quietly in the lobby now held the attention of the most powerful person the hotel had seen in years. When the meeting ended, Ms. Wei stood and said in Mandarin, "If he's staying, I'm investing. If not, I walk." Then she turned to Elijah, extended her hand, and added in perfect English, "You should be running this place." Elijah shook her hand, steady, respectful, quiet. But inside, he was on fire. And the executives? They couldn't even pretend anymore. They were staring at the bellboy like they were seeing him for the first time. The doors had barely closed behind Ms. Wei before the room exploded. "Unbelievable," one exec muttered, slapping his notes on the table. "Caro, how long have you known about him?" another whispered. "Where did you even find this kid?" Caro didn't answer. He just looked at Elijah. "You saved the deal," he said plainly. "She was going to walk, but you made her stay." Elijah didn't gloat. He didn't smirk. He just stood there, calm, collected, like the storm hadn't touched him at all. "We'd like to offer you a contract," Caro continued. "Officially. Management position, relocation if needed, company vehicle, full salary." Elijah paused. It was everything he'd dreamed of, kind of. But something felt off. Because just a week ago, these people wouldn't have noticed if he'd vanished mid-shift. He'd been invisible, disposable. And now they were offering suits and perks like that erases everything? So he cleared his throat. "I appreciate the offer," he said, voice steady. "But before I sign anything, I have conditions." Caro's brows lifted. "Conditions?" "I want wage increases for support staff, janitors, porters, night shift desk workers." There was silence. "And not just a one-time bump. I want structured pay growth, with benefits." One exec coughed, like he'd heard wrong. "And I want language development training for everyone, multilingual bonuses, opportunities for anyone to rise, not just those who got noticed." Caro leaned back in his chair, studied him. "You're negotiating with us?" Elijah didn't flinch. "I'm making sure I don't walk through that door alone." For a long moment, no one said anything. Then Caro smiled, not with sarcasm, but something closer to respect. "You're bold." "No," Elijah replied. "I'm just not blind anymore." And just like that, the boy they once ignored, who pushed carts in silence, had flipped the entire hierarchy on its head. Because now, they were waiting on him. It started with whispers. People said Elijah had been promoted. Others said he saved the hotel. Some joked that he was actually undercover, a corporate spy or the CEO's secret son. But the truth? No one really knew. Until Friday morning. That's when the elevator doors opened, and Elijah stepped out. No bellboy uniform, no guest luggage in hand, just a dark tailored suit, a navy blue pocket square, and quiet confidence that felt earned. The lobby went dead silent. Front desk clerks froze mid-keystroke. A guest actually dropped their coffee. The night manager blinked like he was hallucinating. Even Miles, the smug assistant manager, stood there, mouth slightly open, watching Elijah walk across the marble floor like he'd never seen him before. Because he hadn't? Not like this. Elijah walked past the concierge and gave her a polite nod. "Morning, Patrice." She blinked, nodded back, then whispered to the doorman, "Did you see that? He knows my name." He stopped at the front desk and signed a few documents. The receptionist didn't even pretend to understand what was happening. She just handed him a pen, like it was ceremonial. Upstairs, the executive suite had already prepared his key card. But Elijah didn't go straight up. Instead, he turned to the staff lounge, where the porters, cleaners, and overnight workers had just clocked out. He walked in, smiled, and said, "There's a staff-wide meeting Monday morning. Mandatory. Don't worry. It's good news." They looked at him like he was speaking another language. He was. It was the language of recognition. And when Elijah finally rode that elevator to the top floor, something shifted in the building. Not just policies, not just titles. Energy. Because when the forgotten rise, they don't just change their own lives. They change the air for everyone still waiting to be seen. Elijah didn't take the job to prove anything. Not to the managers who once ignored him. Not to the execs who only saw his worth when money was on the line. And definitely not to the people who still whispered, "How did he get up there?" He took it for his mother, who taught him to speak softly but think boldly. For the staff who walked past help wanted signs knowing they'd never get a real shot. For the version of himself who once stood in that lobby, wondering if anyone would ever look past the blazer and see the mind beneath it. Elijah knew what it felt like to be underestimated, to be used as decoration, as background, as a body in a role. So now, he made it his mission to change that, one policy at a time. He created mentorship tracks for workers with no formal degrees. He built a language access program where the janitor who spoke 3 languages was now training new hires. He even got Miles transferred, sideways. But it wasn't about revenge. It was about visibility. Because being brilliant doesn't always look how people expect. It doesn't always come with Ivy League stamps or smooth-talking resumes. Sometimes it's quiet. Sometimes it mops floors. Sometimes it waits patiently until someone finally listens. And when someone like Elijah gets in the room, he makes sure the door stays open. For everyone. So next time you walk past someone and assume you've got them figured out, pause. You might be ignoring the smartest person in the building, and they might be letting you. For now. Have you ever been overlooked because of how you looked or where you worked? Let us know in the comments. You never know who's watching or who's about to rise.